Hey everybody, this is Joel Toppin, and this is video number 7 of Navajo Wars. And what we're going to do in this video is continue our game just where we left off last time. Last time we took a passage of time procedure operation, and we showed all the procedures associated with passage of time. And so what we're going to do now is draw our next card and see where that takes us. And the card draws come up. Looks like more drought is going to afflict the land. It's an operations card, and again, the player has no APs to spend. We're going to hope to change that here during this card. So the enemy's going to get to go first. They're going to collect 4 APs and conduct their operation. So they're going to get 4 APs, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5. So they're going to pick up 5 of these AP points. So let's drag those out there. Next, we roll 2 dice. Number 6 and number 5, number 6 and number 4 are going to swap. They're actually going to flip over. So we flip those over to reveal different instructions underneath. And now we are going to experience our very first enemy raid. Here's how these work. What we're going to do here to fulfill this instruction is the instruction here, raid, costs 7 APs. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We almost got away with it. 7 APs, and we stick them into Santa Fe. We then flip them over to show their raid side. Every AP counter has a raid side to it for this particular function. Now the raid is best summarized in a flowchart that is available to our playtest team. And I'll do my best to describe it here in the video, but it walks you through the whole process because this is arguably the most complex part of the game. But once you've done it a couple times, you find out really it's quite simple to actually do in practice. So we spent 7 APs. Now the enemy is actually going to collect some bonus raid markers. So we're going to pull out bonus raid markers, and here's how it's going to work. They're going to get a bonus raid marker for the ferocity value of the most ferocious family on the map, which happens to be family C, which has a ferocity rating of 1. So they're going to add 1 more raid. Here's the deal. As your tribe if you have a family group that becomes extraordinarily ferocious, they build a reputation and the enemy acts accordingly. So there is a cost to becoming more ferocious. Yeah, you become more powerful in battle, but the enemy is going to send more troops against you. So here's the first thing that happens. First thing that happens is we are going to check to see if any families are on a outpost counter. If this family was located on this outpost, here's what would happen. If it was a mission, we remove 1 population counter and put it on the passage of time box. Okay? Next, the raid's going to slam right into these guys, and if you are located on a mission outpost, you may not do any form of reaction. So that family, if you're on the same space as an outpost, you're going to get gobbled up. And that's going to be really, really bad. So we're going to go ahead and put him back to where he was. And continue the raid. We have nobody on outposts. The outpost markers, there's no families on them. So here we go. We're going to place 1 or 2 enemy raid counters into a single raid box that does not already contain a raid counter, and which is either adjacent to a previously placed raid counter or the Santa Fe box. In this case, since we have our very first raid counter coming on, he's going to come into here, which is the raid box adjacent to Santa Fe. Once a raid counter has been placed, the player is given the opportunity to do 1 of 3 reactions. These are the reactions, 4 reactions. You could ambush. Ambush can only happen, though, when a raid counter actually enters the family's box. You can negotiate, but again, the raid counter has to be in the family's box. You can also harass. Harassment costs 1 AP, but what it does is it places a harass token onto the map, and you have to place it into an empty box that is within 3 raid boxes of a family that contains a man. Okay? Here's what a harass counter does. If a harass counter is in a box and the enemy raid counter has to enter there, you have to put 2 raid counters in. And so the effect is it slows down the process of the enemy raid. So once the enemy is out of raid counters on Santa Fe, the raid stops. So that's the function of harass counters. And unfortunately, we have no APs to spend with which to do any of those reactions. Ambush and negotiation also cost you 1 AP, so we won't be able to do any of that. But evasion is free, and that's what happens when a raid counter enters the same box as a family. Then what's going to happen is you can roll to try to evade. And I'm sure we're going to get to that in just a moment, but for now there's no reaction possible. So we check to see if there was any successful negotiation or ambush. There wasn't. Is the newly placed raid counter in the same box as a family? No. Are there raid counters still in Santa Fe? Yes. So we're going to place another raid counter. And again, it has to be placed into a single raid box which does not already contain a raid counter and which is either adjacent to a previously placed raid counter or the Santa Fe box. So obviously the next marker has to go here. Again, we can't evade. Again, there's more counters to be placed. But this time the raid paths branch. Which direction do they go? If the raid counter could go in more than one direction, you place the raid counter into the raid box which is closer to the nearest in terms of movement points, raid box containing a family counter. If there's still a tie between two families, you use alphabetic priority to break the tie. In other words, A before C, A before B, B before C, and so forth. So in this case, the counter is going to go this way, and now it has entered the same box as a family, and now we can evade. Here's how evasion works. You don't spend any APs, you roll one die, you add the family's evasion modifier, which is the number on the left, and whatever you roll, that's the raid box that your family can enter. If you roll an unmodified 6, you may jump immediately to Canyon de Chelly, thus escaping probably for good the enemy that's pursuing you. So here we roll a die. We roll a 3, which is modified by +1 to a 4, and now he can enter the raid box. It has to be on the same raid track that has that number. So we can jump immediately to raid box 4, which happens to be the next one further away. Now we have an interesting situation because the raids could still branch off. Okay, let's just assume for a second we rolled a 5. All right, and he went into the 5 box with the evasion. Now the raid counter could go in one of 3 directions. It could go from here this way, it could go towards the family that just evaded, or it could go through the Zuni Mountains and pursue into Hopi Land. The direction is it's going to go towards the family that's nearest in terms of movement points. It would cost them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to enter this box. It would cost them 4, 9 to enter this one. So family A is no longer a priority. Family B would be a priority before A. Then family C down here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the priority would be B first. They would go after this one first. If this one were further back, it would go for C and then A. You follow? The raid counters, when they have the opportunity to branch off, will head towards the nearest in terms of movement points family. Well, in our case, we rolled a 4, a modified 4, so this is still a priority. It's only 4 movement points to enter this box, so that's where they're going to put their next one. And again, we can attempt to evade. This time we rolled a 2, which is modified to 3. It is not high enough. Okay, the modified die roll does not exceed the raid box value of our present raid box. So this family is raided. Here's what happens. What we're going to do is we're going to remove one population counter from the affected family and put it into the passage of time box. So family A gets nailed. I'm going to put the child into the passage of time box. And here's the function of that. I won't be able to get that child again until I take passage of time. So that child's out of play. Next thing that's going to happen, if the affected family's ferocity is 0 or 1, which it is, we're going to lose 1 culture point for each empty population counter space on the affected family's box. There is now, since we removed the child, 1 empty space for a population counter on family A's box. So I'm going to lose 1 culture point. If his ferocity was 2 or 3, I would lose 1 military point. The loss would come from the military track rather than the culture track. Now, imagine for a moment that family A gets nailed again. Let's just say that they only had 2 counters in here when the family gets nailed. Then I have the choice. Do I take the man or do I take the woman out? It's my choice which one to take out, but whichever one, they would have to go into the passage of time box. Now I've got 2 empty spaces. So now the damage is magnified to -2 culture points. If the final counter, final adult counter especially, is removed from that family's box, you lose 3 culture or military points, depending on the ferocity of that particular family. So, it is also conceivable that the last adult could be removed from the family's box, leaving only a child in that family. If that is to happen, then the counter is removed from the map once the last adult is removed, placed back on the family box until an adult counter is restored in there. The child just remains in its place until an adult comes and joins that family. So in our case, this family got hit. Now, once a family's hit on any given raid, it is not hit a second time. So that this family's done, it's been affected. The enemy's done with this particular family. But there's still raid markers to be placed, so they're going to put some more down. And again, it costs 1, 2, 3, 6 movement points to get here, to get to this family. It costs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to get after family C. So they're not going to attack family C. They're going to come after family B. 1, I have no evasion ability. And by the way, corn, planted corn, costs 2 raid markers to enter. So if I have planted corn in a space, it'll cost the enemy 2 counters to go in there. So let's say that family B had a corn counter in there. It would cost both of these counters then to enter that box. And the presence or absence of corn counters doesn't cost movement points per se. So even if family B had a corn counter in its space, the priority would still be toward family B because the movement points are closer here to B than to C. Well, in this case, we still have no evasion ability because we have no APs, so we're going to get hit here. And our only hope is to evade. So we roll the dice, and this time we rolled a 5, which is modified to a 6. In this case, since it's a modified 6, we have no choice but to put the family in the 6 box, which will put that family out of reach of any further raid counters. The last raid counter would head towards family C and be placed here, but obviously it's not going to get there. So the enemy raid has petered out, and now the raid is done. Once the raid is done, all the raid counters are gone from Santa Fe or can no longer be placed in a raid box owing to the presence of corn or a harassment counter. Then what's going to happen is we're going to remove all corn counters from raid boxes containing raid counters, put them back in the corn pool. We're going to remove all raid and harass counters from all raid boxes and put them back into their appropriate out-of-play boxes. And if no raid counter ever entered a raid box containing a family, then we're going to do an outpost expansion, which means the outposts will then move to the next highest box. And at the same time, for each outpost that moves, you lose 1 culture point. So that can be a big deal. Well, in our case, we don't have to worry about that. A family's box was entered by a raid counter, so we don't have to worry about that instruction. Here in Vassal, I'm just going to click a button, and it'll take care of all of those counters and put them back to where they go. And so the enemy has fulfilled its instructions. Now all of the counters slide up, raid counter slides down, and now it is the player's turn. And since we are running out of time here, we won't be able to undertake our operation, but what we'll do is we'll save it, and in our next video we'll take our next series of operations and show you what it's like to destroy, or at least try to destroy, an enemy outpost. We're going to see if we can't have a crack maybe at this mission here and see if we can't destroy it.